In the words of Captain America, we're in the end game now. The title race is coming close to a conclusion. The relegation race, the race to survive, is coming close to its conclusion as well. The race for top four is coming close to its conclusion. There is so much to play for in this season. But before we talk about all the wonderful things about who's going to win the league or how things are going to go, we want to take a step back to look at previous title races involving Liverpool and Chelsea and have a bit of a reflective podcast this week. As of recording, Arsenal versus Man City has not kicked off yet, so we will not be previewing that game because there's absolutely no point. As you were hearing these words, you know exactly what happened. You know who won or lost or drew, and that's all I have to say about that. And, yeah. But I wanted to start with you. Both M's. I'm joined, as usual, by Matthew, Marcus. Craig is here with us for part 2, where we're going to talk about our Mount Rushmore of football opinions. This is part 1. Part 2 will get very spicy of that particular conversation. But to start off with, for you, Marcus, when it comes down to conversations around the running, obviously you've been there over numerous years as a Liverpool fan. We've seen success, we've seen near misses, and then of course we had the Rodgers season, which is a whole separate category all to itself. But what's really important for you as a fan as you go into these kind of final games in the stretch?
Yeah, I think one thing that has to be considered from a fan's perspective is to really try to enjoy it, because I know for myself, Liverpool have always been chasing that elusive Premier League title, and it wasn't until COVID title where we, finally made that happen. And I think that, we were so far ahead COVID year, it was inevitable we was going to win the title. The only thing that was going to stop us was COVID. COVID was our biggest competition that year. And I think that before that, in all the other run-ins, there was this deep sense of desperation for the title that you almost couldn't enjoy the process. And I think, that would be, my number one kind of fan tip in the process, is to take a step back and really enjoy the race, enjoy the games, enjoy the run-in, enjoy the drama that comes with them, enjoy the ups, embrace the downs, and yeah, make the most of the process. Because, from a Liverpool perspective, I still think the greatest title race of all time, outside of, in terms of outside of Aguero's winner, which was great, but in terms of quality of title race, it was Liverpool Man City in 2018-19. And just for some perspective of how massive of a title race that was, that title race pretty much started halfway through the season when Liverpool went 17 games unbeaten, and they won their last 9 games in a row. And Man City was able to pip them to the title by a point because they won 14 games in a row.
Madness.
Now, that is a major, major title race. And that I think sets the standard for title races, where you say, look, like, you can win 9 games in a row and go unbeaten for your final 17 games of the season, only lose 1 game all year, and you're still not winning the league.
That is
so
bonkers.
The level of competitiveness at that end is huge, and I'll save some stuff to touch on that when we get back to Arsenal a little bit later. But I think that's some of my thoughts on the title race from a Liverpool perspective.
Yeah, I think that's quite insightful. I think it's quite interesting as well. Just when you look at those runs you both went on, and the fact that 13 games unbeaten, 14 games of win run streak, and they pip you to the post at one point. For you, Matthew, because obviously right now Chelsea are in a you nickname it Charity FC. You're in a different race, and you call it Charity FC. Obviously, Frank is back, and he's not quite been able to sprinkle whatever magic he had as a manager. The jury's still out on the team. But when you look back on the title runs you've had, obviously when Conte was in charge, when he switched to the back 3 after my wonderful team demolished them at the Emirates.
Yep.
Just remember that tonight, boys. as of recording. But like for you, what was really important when you look back on all those title races that you've lived through?
It's running a race. It's literally like running a race and just refusing to look behind you, because the moment you start looking behind, it's a simple enough explanation as you don't know what's going to come ahead. You know, everyone's focusing on this one game. Everyone's putting their focus on in this game because this is the one we're waiting for. This is the one they said it was going to decide. But you've still got at least 6 or 7 games ahead. What you don't want to do is look behind at the potential, you know, your nearest rivals and stumble along the way on your remaining games, because it's got the potential to get much more difficult after this. I mean, you still got a challenging running at the best anyway, so it's just really enjoying that, just staying focused. I mean, the last time we won the title, and this was a mistake that I made. We were going on a bit of a run, just unbeatable. Conte had us playing. I think we lost like 1, maybe 2 games along the way to winning the title. There were 2 games that were really pivotal. One was when we lost to Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace at the time were a bit of a bogey team for us. I remember us scoring first, and then the unexpected happens. Not only did they score against us, they scored against us twice in the first half. And I am watching, I'm looking ahead, I'm on my phone, I'm scrolling on my laptop, being like, when's the second goal coming? Because I'm used to it coming, and it didn't come. That hit me back a little bit. Then there was the actual game. I think we were done a bit of a favour by, I want to say Middlesbrough or Leicester. They beat Tottenham to kind of hold them back a little bit. So if we won our next game, we were champions. That happened to be away at West Brom. And I remember just losing the focus a little bit because I was at a pub quiz. And anyone who's been to a pub quiz knows you're not allowed to be on your phone. And yet there's this geezer right here constantly doing this, just waiting and waiting and waiting. Because it's West Brom. I'm thinking we should be turning these guys. I think we won our previous game like 3 or 4-1. No, it was Middlesbrough. We won 3-0. I'm scrolling away thinking just breathe, keep it ready. And then Batshuayi comes through the special and gives us that 1-0 and keeps the title. So you're in a good position. I mean, even when you're in a good position, it still pays to look ahead. Always look ahead. I say it at school. The best athletes, like your Bolts, when you're running their races, they're always looking forward. They're not worried about what's behind them. The goal in mind is right there. So if you're saying that, Marcus, like having fun at the same time and looking ahead, knowing what's there, it's going to be a great time. So just run your race. Keep the blinders on. Straight on.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Obviously, unfortunately, we've gone on a 3-game winless streak, an unbeaten streak, but winless. So depending on how you want to look at it, there's positives there and there's some negatives. For you, Mark, looking at the last couple of games Arsenal have played, obviously putting aside the City game because we just don't know what's going to happen because we're not there yet. But you are, listeners. You are. We're not. But looking at the last few games, so West Ham, obviously the Liverpool game, and I really want to get your thoughts on that. Let's start with that game in particular. Liverpool game, the 2-2 at Anfield. What was your impressions and thoughts from that game, just like watching it live and obviously now on reflection in light of the following 2 matches that have came?
Yeah, look, I if I'm honest, I'm a little worried for Arsenal, based on what I've seen over the last couple of games. I think the Liverpool game was a really good chance for Arsenal to show that, look, we can handle big occasions, and in a title race when the pressure's on us and we're being hunted down, we've got what this takes. And you had everything lined up for you to do that in that game. Like, you dominated us for the first 10 minutes was relatively even, but then you broke out and you started to dominate us. You got a 2-0 lead, and I'm sat there thinking, I'm sat there in Portugal, surrounded by Arsenal fans, because apparently we went to an anti-Liverpool hotel. Thanks to my wife, who's a massive United fan. She Googled it, I'm sure, because there was literally barely any other Liverpool fans in sight. And I was surrounded by Arsenal fans. Anyway, you're 2-0 up, and I'm thinking, this is going to be a mauling. All Arsenal need to do now is sit back and pip us on the counter-attack, play this game well, managers, and they'll beat us 4-5-1, game over, right? We're going to have to come out of our shell. They're going to press. And I've said it before. It's small things at Anfield that made the difference. And Arteta last year at Anfield decided to piss off the fans and get in a little scuffle with Klopp on the sideline. And Anfield basically just said, we don't like that. and they reacted and they rose, and Liverpool respond to Anfield when they rise. And it was the same with Xhaka this time when he had his little moment where he lost it, and Anfield rose, and we got that goal before half time. And honestly, the second half I feel was about as one sided as the second half where we beat Man United 7-0, apart from the fact that we didn't get everything going for us in the way that we wanted to go in the goal scoring end. We had control of the game. We dominated forward. We had 4 or 5 massive chances. Ramsdale made a couple of great saves. I will also say that you could have won the game there as well, right at the end on the counter attack. But I think all in all, a draw was the best Arsenal could have asked for, considering the nature of the way the game played out. I left very disappointed that we didn't win that game. I think with missed penalty, which was a soft penalty, no doubt, and the save from Ramsdale tipping Salah's around the post, and the clearance off the line from the corner. I think them chances alone was enough that I think we should have really came away winning that game. But yeah, obviously what's followed with the 2 draws again has shown Arsenal's frailty in a title race. 2-0 lead against West Ham really shouldn't be thrown that way. You've got to get your act together in them big moments and say, no, look, they've got 1 goal back. Get your shit together, get in positions. We're not conceding this. Obviously, you then missed a penalty in that game too. And then they scored, 5 minutes later? Might have even been less. And the Southampton game was shambolic. You got out of that game incredibly fortunately at the end with 2 late goals, but to be going behind after 1 minute, when again these are not moments of kind of okay, well, it was just great play or whatever. Poor mistakes by Ramsdale, moments where you can't be concentrating in the first 60 seconds of a football game. What is going on in them types of moments? For me, that leads me to worry about Arsenal. And partly not just because Arsenal are in a title race, but because Manchester City are the absolute kings of knowing how to do this. They've been there before. They know how to get results. They know how to grind them out. They know how to pass the ball around and bore the life out of us for 60 minutes after they're 3-0 up already. That's what Man City do, and that's what Man City do well. And I wouldn't be surprised if Man City win every game between now and the end of the season. So I think the pressure is really on Arsenal. Because if you think about it, you play City tonight, but then after that you have Chelsea, Newcastle, Brighton. 2 teams that are on great form, and Chelsea. So yeah, I think as I've been saying it for weeks that I think Man City will win the title. I still feel that way, but I think Arsenal really are in the decisive, 3-game period for them if they're going to win the title.
Yeah, I think it has been interesting the last couple of games, especially the performances. I take a lot of kind of encouragement from how we fought back against Southampton to get the draw. We should never have been in that situation in the first place. But I think the way we kind of rallied back to get those 2 goals, and then at the same time, we could have won it at the death. A deflection from Reece Nelson's shot just past the post. Gabriel Jesus missed a hatful of chances. And I really hope that tonight he really shows the player that Man City have let go rather than the player that they don't care that he's not there anymore. I just really hope he turns up in a big way. But I guess on that note, because there has been a lot of talk in the press about Arsenal having a weak mentality. And I know I asked you this last week as on the previous podcast, but for you, Marcus, do you think it is a mentality issue or is it just individual players just not performing to their standard?
No, I don't necessarily think it's a mentality issue. I think Arteta has a really good mentality, and he drills that mentality into his players as much as he can. And I just think it's an experience thing at the end of the day. There's a big difference between leading, a team and being an assistant in a team. And Arteta obviously was part of that Man City title runs and all of that and them experience. But there's a big difference when you're leading the ship. And I think Arteta is a very, very good leader. It's clear to see from watching the documentary on Arsenal and the whole process. He manages players well. He's a good leader. He's a good coach. He's a very good tactician. It's just the lack of experience. And I said it back when you had Aubameyang and you finished 8th for the first time this Arsenal squad has one world-class player with 4 or 5 players on the cusp. And what has developed over these 3 seasons since then, 4 seasons since then, is that them 4 or 5 players on the cusp are performing at world-class levels. So now Arsenal have a core set of world-class players who have never competed for a title before. I think it's worth putting some perspective that 3 years ago, Arsenal finished 43 points behind Liverpool in the title race. 2 years ago, Arsenal finished 25 points behind Man City in the title race. And last year, Arsenal finished 23 points behind Man City in the title race. But even the most optimistic Arsenal fan would have not said that at this stage in the season, Arsenal would be top of the league. So the progress is clear to see for everyone. And I just think that if Arsenal do fall short, which I feel is the likely reality, Arsenal fans shouldn't phrase the season or overview the season as one where we sat top for so long and we threw it away, but should see it as a season of progress and incredible progress, with a team that are young, inexperienced, and have given themselves another run of experience in the process, that if they add 2 or 3 more players, are still going to be there and thereabouts in the mix next season and are building and growing in the right direction. Because it is incredible to make a 43-point gap in 3 years. Like that's ridiculous. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, when you put it that way, I think that does give a lot of like positive credence to the year. I think for me, I'm very torn on it. I don't see it. I don't see it, and I won't see it as a failure if we don't secure the title. Like I said, like considering where we've come from this year and from the previous season to where we are now, it's astounding how well Arsenal are being. But at the very same time, it matters to hold out and get over the line. And my only concern is like, what impact would it have on the team to not make it and then have to go again? I don't know whether that will be detrimental or positive. I can't really tell. I know as a fan, it will be gutting to not get over the line. And I think on reflection, we can all look back and say, well, what a great year we had. We've come so far. But it's something about crossing that boundary. And I know you've experienced that at Liverpool with, the nearly years and getting there and just that release of finally doing it. But I guess on that point for you, Matthew, because you guys are in like a massive transition. Massive transition. And I actually wanted to just touch on this kind of thing about the news in the press that allegedly Mauricio Pochettino is edging ever so closely to Chelsea. But when you look at what Arsenal have done so far, when you look at the absolute shambles that is Stamford Bridge, I mean, the song "Stamford Bridge is Falling Down" is very appropriate right now, and it has been rocking the whole year. But what impact are you hoping that Pochettino will have, and are you happy with the news linking him to the club?
I mean, he's someone that knows the league really, really well. He's someone that worked with nothing when that time is at Spurs, and I think he's been spending his last few years at PSG, so he's gaining that little bit more experience across the board. He was a success at Spurs. He's probably still is to this day, one of their best ever managers, if not their best ever manager in terms of getting them to a sustained level of competing and to a Champions League final.
Hold that thought. Marcus, do you view Pochettino as a success at Tottenham, and would you put him as one of their best managers?
I think Pochettino was a success at Tottenham. He took a Tottenham team that could never really get across the line in terms of even just finishing top 4 consistently, to a Champions League final, a League Cup final, 2 second place finishes. I think all in all, he was a success at Tottenham. Now, I think Tottenham are a very funny one because they're in that weird category of, and I think this is where I give Pochettino the credit that I think he deserves, is that one of the hardest transitions to make in world football, I think, is from being a B-level club to an A-level club. And I think Tottenham made that technical transition from B to at least maybe A- under Pochettino. And the big questions was always there. Could he get them across the line? And that's the unfortunate nature of football. They didn't win a title. They didn't win they didn't win a Premier League. They didn't win Champions League. They didn't win the League Cup. And he left there winning nothing. But it's not like Tottenham have a illustrious history of winning trophies. So I think he is one of the greatest managers in Tottenham's history, for what he's achieved at Tottenham. And we just put that into perspective with the nature of who Tottenham are as a club. Because if Pochettino had came from Southampton to Liverpool and done the exact same thing that he'd done for Liverpool at Southampton, he wouldn't even be in Liverpool's top five greatest managers of all time. But that's the nature of the difference between the two clubs.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of like, but the difference, but what we have with Spurs big time is a winning mentality. Up until last year, I mean, that standard of always competing and always winning for like 17, the best part of 17 years. We don't win all these trophies over time for nothing. So he's going to come in and understand that, even with a new head, a new chairman in charge, the mentality for winning is still there, because if he necessarily doesn't have it, the fans do, and some of the players do. You go as far as players. You got players there who've been there over 10 years. So like as Blaqueta, you think of all the trophies, FA Cup, Premier League, Champions League, Europa League, Club World Cup, Super Cup. He's won it all. So he's now taking on, and to understand that mentality at least has got to somehow continue. The difference is he's now got a bigger squad. He's got a very talented squad, but a very big and very bloated squad. He's got to figure out who he wants coming up to, we're basically preparing for next year, whatever league we're going to be playing in, but we're not going to be in Europe. Give him time to get us to improve, to go up the league. Who do you want in that squad? Who do you want? Who do you like? Who do you fancy? Because you're always still hearing rumours of Lukaku possibly returning as well from his loan spell at Italy. Hey. Now, I don't know how I personally feel about that, because after that interview at Christmas, he's kind of left it all kind of hanging out. It kind of feels like, and the last thing we need is another player here that isn't going to necessarily muck in and play for the badge, because you don't necessarily respect the manager. We need players that want to fight. We need players that want to play. We need players that have just an ounce of initiative and discipline to try and drag us from where we are. In no way, no how, are we an 11th place team.
You are, because you're there.
We're there, but are you telling me on FIFA someone can get us someone better? If I can get better on FIFA in real life, what's your problem? You know what I mean? Football Manager, what's your problem? The point I'm trying to make here is this. I'm not saying that we have the right to be competing for league titles or stuff like that, but we shouldn't be where we are, really. We really shouldn't be. Do we deserve to be? Possibly. But should we be there? No. And with someone like him, again, who's experienced in that league and does play some good football, I feel better with him than I do with someone like Nagelsmann. I don't know much about Nagelsmann, but Pochettino is someone that I know. He's beaten us a few times, beaten you a few times, and scalp over Liverpool a few times. So as long as someone who gets us up the table and makes sense of his mess of a squad, he couldn't come any quicker. I'm surprised he didn't come here now, because we're not in a position where we need to take on the project manager. We're actually doing worse than we were under Potter, which was somehow a miraculous achievement. We haven't won a game in 5.
Well, I mean, the delay in him joining could come down to the contractual agreement he has with Tottenham upon leaving. If there's a time span on it, then maybe by the time... no, because he was at PSG last. I don't know.
Yeah, it was 5 years since he left Spurs.
Maybe for him it's better to just start at a fresh end of the season. Everything's done, and then you have to have that massive fire sale in June. So maybe he'll just use the next few games just to assess how things are. Look at the squad, make his prediction as to who he wants to back, who he thinks can go to war for him, and who he thinks is not going to be there and usable, and kind of move on from there. I guess this is going to be a big run-in for all three of our teams as things go to play. I think for you, what's the highest you can achieve now at Liverpool, Mark? What can you guys really realistically get in terms of league position?
Yeah, I think top 4 feels a long, long way away. 9 points. Newcastle look on good enough form that I think they'll probably finish top 4. The hope is that enough of them teams play against each other enough and play against enough of the teams around there that if we can go and win our final, 9 games of the season, then maybe we could still just about sneak top 4. But I think that's hard. I think it's likely we'll probably finish 5th. Yay, Europa League, baby. But yeah, I think that's the most likely outcome. I think if everything goes very well, we could finish top 4. And yeah, our form has taken a upturn, but maybe just a little too late. We'll see. But yeah, I'd say it's most likely we'll probably finish 5th.
in the league.
most likely.
Matthew, what are you hoping for, believing for? What's the best you can get?
40 points.
Safety,
40 points.
like
Safety.
Take that.
Top 10. I'll take top 10. Do you know what makes it even worse? And I look at the table and I get mad. When we returned from the international break in March, the team behind us, Aston Villa, had the exact same points. They're now fifth with 50 odd points? This was back in March. So in that time, they've won every single game. We've lost every single game. They were behind us for a very long time. I just want to have that sink. When that sunk in, not that it hasn't sunk in already, but it just made me realise that in a short space of time in those 5 games, just what could have been done if we won our winnable games and maybe had a little bit of a stumble in our not so winnable games. I'm not saying we'd be 5th, but we wouldn't certainly be 11th.
Okay, let's throw it this way then. So looking at Pochettino comes in, let's say he does come in, that's confirmed. Into next season, what are you expecting? Where do you believe you'll finish?
Anywhere in the top 6.
Wow.
Anywhere in the top 6.
Are you going to give us a position?
I wouldn't mind finishing 5th, 2 points outside the top 4.
Wow.
In context from this season, you tell me with no European football, it's a chance they're going to take a break away from it. You know, less of a distraction for a lot of these players. So, you're talking about next season, right?
So next season.
No, next season.
Next season, Pochettino comes in, fresh start. You've cleared off the excess baggage from your squad. You've bought in, because you are going to buy again, the new players that he would want to work with, and you're saying 5th with no European distraction. You're saying 5th is what you're expecting.
I want to be in Europe.
I'll be disappointed with that, to be honest.
What, you think we're going to go ahead and win the league?
No, but I think you should be a lot higher than 5th.
2nd, 3rd, 4th, maybe 4th by 2 points.
But the thing is when you look, I'm making a list of like the other teams, right? And when you look at the other teams that are around there, you've got City, who are guaranteed to be in the top 4. You would think inevitably not much is going to change there. You would hope that Arsenal can build upon what they've done this season and aren't just going to fall apart. So that you would hope that they would be there or thereabouts. Liverpool are going to have a summer where they completely change things up, get rid of everyone, bring in a new midfield. We hope. You would expect that Liverpool are going to be back and thereabouts around the top 4 at the very least. And then Newcastle are probably going to spend another 100 and 150 million, and quite wisely, because they have done so far. Like, I then think you've got Man United, you then look at Chelsea. So 6th, I think, or top 6 is reasonable based on how competitive it is, I think.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. I just think, like, you're Chelsea. Like, the last thing you would want to do is end up in a position where you're not competing, like, you're not high enough up in the table. Like, to be anywhere outside of the top 4 places, I think, for the club you have, for what you've done historically, and also for the way how Todd Bowley has reacted. Because for me, if you're going to end up 5th next season, what was the point of sacking Tuchel at the start of the project? It just doesn't make sense.
The funny thing is with him, if it wasn't for the games that he won, we would have been in a much worse position.
There you go.
That's the thing. So if anything, he's still doing us favours even right now. And I'm just saying 5th. I'm just saying in top 6 because in reality, the contrast of where we're coming from now, the mood of the club, the state of the club, like so many individuals just playing for themselves. It wouldn't surprise me if a top 6 might seem a bit low, but in context of how the club is going, I see it as just at least get that. Or we could just do a Conte and flip the script and go win the league.
Do you think your fans would be happy with a 5th place finish? Would you be going for like a domestic trophy, or is just 5th place and that's it?
I think if we're going to go for the domestic trophies, because they've been evading us for the past 5 or 6 years, maybe do a double. I think it's always good to do a good in the domestic. Get a double. Let's not shy away from it. An FA Cup and a League Cup victory are great. We've lost the last how many finals, so to finally kill that hoodoo, I think would install a little bit more confidence to try and apply that to the league, as well as improving the league at the same time. And then maybe you never know the year after that, if things go really, really well, Todd Bowley stops going into dressing rooms and we actually have some players who want to stay in the club. Who knows what can be achieved? I just think that there's so much in the back that's going on that's just too disruptive to a lot of these players, and it's like they can't even focus on the game. From this time last year where the whole thing with Roman and the sanction put a lot of jobs at risk. So the owner coming in and just taking complete and utter control and not knowing exactly how to run a Premier League club, to signing all these players just like that, without knowing your best squad, and hiring a manager who, let's be honest, was not ready to get rid of all of that, to somehow flipping it around to, same way how we somehow thought we were going to win the Champions League, we could beat Real Madrid was completely naive, utterly naive. That's why I'm thinking a top six with maybe a good domestic double cup run or something would be good, just to kind of steady the ship, because we're still sinking at the moment. We need to see the back of this season. We need to just realise, I think all parts of the club, players, owners, and whoever, need to have a long look at themselves and realise that what's gone wrong this year to do right next year, with one, having a manager with a little bit more experience and who's used to performing at a top level. And above all, most importantly, is he a Chelsea man? That's the one thing that Pochettino's got to...
Is he a Chelsea man? Based on your criteria? Do you think he fits that bill?
He's going to have more of a backbone than Potter. He's going to have much more of a backbone, which is one, which he needs to have. He needs to have more. When you're working with players like Messi and Mbappe and Neymar, you need some kind of backbone. You need some kind of chat or a bite back or something. And he's more likely to have it than Potter. Not more than Tuchel, but more than Potter.
Well, I tell you what, the way how PSG capitulated in his season, I don't know. I wouldn't really be that confident that he has that. I think, if anything, it's more that, if that's a key criteria you're looking for, I would be really concerned, because that was something that I was very shocked at, is how they just fell apart in their Champions League run. But for you, Mark, looking ahead to next season for Liverpool, what is your expectations of a place finish, and what trophies would you like to see make its way back to Anfield Road?
Top four has to be. I don't think there's any excuse, whether in Europe or not in Europe. Top four has to be the minimum expectation. I think the big question mark is going to be, where do Liverpool line up when the season kicks off? Like we can say everything we want to say now, but if we get to the start of the season and our midfield is Curtis Jones, Jordan Henderson, and Fabinho, then I'm gonna say I'll take 40 points. But the reality is that if the changes that are expected to be made are made, and we're able to sign 2 or 3 new, don't have to be Jude Bellingham midfielders, but at the end of the day, 3 midfielders that cost the price of Jude Bellingham are probably going to do a better job than just Jude Bellingham, and I think that's the logic behind that situation. As much as I would love Jude Bellingham, I think the reality is, if you get Nicola Barella, Mason Mount, and Moses Caicedo maybe, or McAllister, the 3 of them playing as your new midfield, or Jude Bellingham, it's hard to argue that you're making bigger progress by signing the 3 of them. But Liverpool need to get back to signing players that are Liverpool players, that fit the Liverpool model. Gakpo is that example, but in midfield, we want someone that fits 22 to 24, that in 2 years, has the potential, with the right coaching and the right guidance, to become one of the best midfielders or better midfielders in world football. I don't need the best midfielder in world football. I take 3 of the top 20 midfielders in world football, and I'd be quite happy. So yeah, I think that's got to be the expectation. Champions League is, something that we most likely won't be playing in, but if we do by some miracle get top 4, then the Champions League's always, got to be a focus. Europa League, yeah, I think inevitably you want to give yourself as many chances as you can to be playing in the Champions League next year, and if that means it's going to be a competitive battle for top 4, then you want to give yourself the opportunity by winning the Europa League. So you want to keep that open. You want to be playing strong enough squads to be able to compete there. Don't really care too much for the domestic trophies, to be honest. I'll leave them for Newcastle. And yeah, they're my thoughts.
Cool. Well, I'm expecting a top four finish from Arsenal again. I'm hoping that this experience and this taste of challenging for the title will spur them on next season to keep that same energy. Just to have a quick little update on the game that's taking place today that we can't review and talk about for those listening after the fact, so you know how it all went down. But he's picked what I'd classify as the quote unquote best available team. So we've got Ramsdale in goal, back four of White, Holding, Gabriel and Zinchenko, and the whole church says, please, Jesus, have your way. Midfield three of Partey, Xhaka and Ødegaard, and the front three, as expected, of Saka, Martinelli and Jesus. Lord, have your way. We are going to move on from Arsenal because there's nothing we can say that you won't already know. So there's no point in you having my thoughts and feelings about the lineup and how I think the game's going to go because you know how it went. And that's all I have to say about that.